talking the South African movie called GAIA. This one is directed by GAIA, and it's kind of an eco-horror film. So it initially focuses on these two like forestry rangers that are doing some type of check through the kind of like this river area, and they're putting these cameras out to, I guess, check on kind of wildlife and stuff like this. However, they run afoul of two type of survivalists that are around the country. And these are two, like a father and son, which are living off the grid for reasons that will become apparent in the movie. Our two forest rangers get separated, and the female one gets injured and then looked after by these two survivalists. But we learn that there is some type of other entity living within this area, and it could be Gaia, the earth goddess itself. And the issue here is that it has this kind of network of fungus living under the earth, and has all these spores and stuff that are going in the atmosphere and causing anyone who's there to turn into sort of mushroom men, for lack of a better word. What'll happen? You have to watch the movie to find out. I have seen some talk that a lot of people feel this is almost like an unofficial prequel to the video game The Last of Us, because the monsters look very similar to that. I haven't played that game, to be honest with you, so I can't really comment. But I'm not going to... It doesn't matter anyway. It's not connected to that. If it was any similarity, it's purely coincidental. But what can we say, I think, that works in this movie? One thing is strikingly obvious with this movie, and that is the absolutely fabulous cinematography on display here. Now, this movie has a definite eco-message. You know, a definite underlying commentary about how humans are destroying the earth, and that's the whole, really the premise of the film. But along that, you do really see the kind of like the director here and his, you know, his clear vision to show you the kind of the beauty of nature in wonderful but also kind of horrifying imagery. And there's some genuinely artistic kind of sequences and shots here. Now, artistic is another thing I would also bring up here, because this is kind of one of these films that we've seen in recent years that are somewhat kind of like an art house movie to a certain degree, and these seem to be growing in popularity, which, you know, there's a little bit art house, a little bit off kilter, a little bit surreal at times, and this one has elements of that. Although I would say this movie is you know, perfectly understandable. It's not one of these films that will be kind of like, I don't really understand what it was going on. It was like impressionist. The movie is narrative is easy to follow, but there are scenes here that are legitimately quite trippy by design, and that's kind of the whole thing. It's, yeah, you know, you've got these spores that are causing hallucinations and things like this. But nonetheless, it's a very artistically made film, and I also think I would really give a shout out to the actors here, who I thought did a great job of making these kind of somewhat underwritten characters, which we'll talk about. But nonetheless, you know, I think they did the best job they could with some decent kind of performances. Along with the kind of the visuals in the cinematography kind of range, I think there's some great use of prosthetic work in regard to these kind of like these fungal creatures and how they kind of affect people. And it looks kind of like horrifying when you're watching these things. You know, you're imagining it happening to yourself and what you would do and things like that. And I think it's pretty interesting and visually very kind of like you see these things and it looks quite striking on screen. Like I said, some people may say it's a derivative of The Last of Us, but having not played that game, you know, to me it was like, I thought it was pretty visually kind of interesting. And despite this movie being quite a slow burn, I was still intrigued with the story and kind of where it's kind of going. Okay, so maybe what doesn't work with this movie, it's maybe a little bit too slow for some people, I would say. You know, slow burn is not necessarily a critique, it's more of just it's not going to be for everyone. But this movie certainly does take its time in places, so I do not think it will be for certain people. For me, I think the main issue I have with this film is there are elements here that to me were just left unexplained. And partially I think this is somewhat by design, but partially I think it's an oversight. For example, we have our two survivalists, for example, and they rescue this one particular girl. Why her? Why not the other guy? Why not these other people that seem to have been there before them, have turned into these kind of mushroom men? The father does not seem to be particularly kind of thrilled about having this woman there. So why rescue her? Why not get rid of her? When you learn out his kind of plans, he clearly has some detrimental thoughts towards the human race. So why not kind of get rid of her if he feels like he's disrupting the ebb and flow of his community, so to speak, is all I'll say. And then we kind of come on to the son, who seems to get an affection for this woman almost straight away, you know, and we learn to believe that he's lived with his father his whole life, yet within a very, very short time, he seems to kind of almost abandon his relationship with the father and kind of just go with this woman. And had this been over a longer period of time, I kind of maybe would have bought that, but it doesn't seem to have been a particularly, you know, great length of time. So there's just some character work here that I didn't really, it didn't really work for me. You know, it's just kind of like, we're given no information about who these other people are that are the mushroom men, and why hasn't anyone kind of looked for them, there's never mentions of missing people, things like this. You know, obviously our two rangers that have gone out there, I would have assumed that the people that they work with would know where they are or where they should be and stuff like that. And it's just, to me, there's a lot of things here that are just underwritten, and I feel are just not particularly all that well thought out. So I think this movie is more concerned about having interesting visuals than maybe a narrative which is particularly tight. This movie does have some good ideas narratively. The idea about this kind of like the biggest organism on the planet being this kind of like this fungal network is interesting. But there has been properties that have used that kind of that before, so it's not completely original. So I feel this movie is enjoyable. It's a well-made film. Narratively, I don't think it's as strong as it could have been. And I do think there are times when character motivations seem a little bit askew with to me. But nonetheless, visually speaking, I think it kind of gives itself some leeway, in my opinion, because it's so interesting to kind of look at, and it has some great visuals, you know, and interesting kind of designs. So I will give this one a 6 out of 10. I still enjoyed it, even though I think it's not the best film narratively speaking. Have you seen it? The 6 out of 10 for me. What did you think of it? Leave me a comment. I look forward to seeing you next time. Bye for now.